Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about India's protesting wrestlers. We also talk about a controversy surrounding pregnancy tests in Madhya Pradesh. But first, we talk about India's evacuation efforts in Sudan. Over the last week, hundreds of people have been killed in the African nation of Sudan, where the country's army and paramilitary forces are engaged in fierce fighting. The clashes erupted after weeks of tension between the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, and the military headed by Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Also caught in the crossfire are about 3,000 Indian nationals who are currently stranded in the violence-hit country. To bring these stranded Indians home, India launched Operation Kaveri on Monday. And as part of the rescue efforts, an Indian naval ship and 2 Indian Air Force aircraft have been deployed so far. In this segment, the Indian Express's Shubhajit Roy joins us to talk about the situation in Sudan and India's evacuation efforts. So to start with, Shubhajit, can you talk about what led to the situation that's been unfolding in Sudan over the last few weeks or so?
Yeah, Rahel, the current conflict situation actually started 15th of April when the country's top 2 military rulers, basically the country's president, which is General Burhan, and his deputy General Dagal, they conflicted in their opinion on how to take the country forward in terms of civilian transition of the government. Just to give you a brief background about the country's history. So in 2021, these 2 generals, once they came to power, they had a sort of understanding who's number 1 and who's number 2. But that relationship frayed over a period of time because General Dagal, who is the number 2, he sort of became ambitious. So now the current debate between the 2 was the next step forward. In that, the RSF, which General Dagal, the number 2 guy who heads that force, RSF, how it should be integrated into the country's military and whether it will lead the military or not. That was the moot point. And General Burhan, because he was the army chief earlier, so he was very mindful of this tension between army and the RSF, which is basically essentially army and the paramilitary. So it was sort of whoever has the upper hand, whoever has control over the country's military, obviously turns out to be the more powerful guy in the scheme of things. So that's where the 2 started sparring. And that has now come to a pass where RSF and army are fighting on the streets of Khartoum and in Sudan. And basically, each of them want to take control of vital installations. So basically, the radio station, the TV station, the military bases, the airports, ports, etc. So that's what has led to the current situation in Sudan.
Right. And how has India responded to this conflict between the Sudanese army and the RSF?
So India has been so far very carefully watching the situation, especially because there are reportedly about 3,000 to 4,000 Indians in Sudan. So these 3,000 Indians' lives are at stake, and therefore India has been very cautious. So what happened was after the initial days of fighting, the government reached out to UAE and Saudi government because Saudi and UAE have a relationship with the guys in the RSF. So External Affairs Minister S. Shashank, he spoke to the Saudi Foreign Minister and the UAE Foreign Minister, and also later Egyptian Foreign Minister, who is a neighbor. And US and UK have also been stakeholders in the peace process there along with the UN. So India has been in touch with all these players through the ambassadors, through the embassies. In fact, Jaishankar, when he was in New York, even met the UN Secretary General to discuss the situation in Sudan. So essentially to enable, because India has an embassy there, but it's a small size embassy with sort of very basic kind of staff. There are diplomats there as well. But so India has sort of reached out to the players who have a skin in the game, who have leverage on the ground, so that it can evacuate its own people who are possibly at risk or and rescue them from there.
Okay, and could you tell us how exactly India plans to get these 3,000 people out of Sudan?
So the situation on the streets is very uncertain, very insecure, risky. Especially in Khartoum, there are pockets where there's fighting happening. As I understand, the Indian embassy itself in Khartoum is located right opposite this airport in Khartoum. An airport saw some bit of fighting because both sides wanted to, as I told you, the military, the army and the RSF wanted to take control. So the airspace is closed, Sudan. So essentially the area is quite tense. So there is very little chance of planes landing there and evacuating large number of people. So India, what it did was it moved one of its navy ships, which was in the region, through the Gulf of Eden to the Red Sea. It went to Port of Sudan, which is right now it is considered safe. So INS, Indian naval ship INS Sumedha, as they're called, it reached Port Sudan on Monday. And India also stationed 2 Indian Air Force aircraft, which are C-130J, basically which can carry about 250 to 400 people in their planes. It's a large-bodied airplane. It's an Air Force aircraft. And they placed it across the Red Sea in Jeddah. So on one side, Port Sudan, and across the Red Sea is Jeddah. So from Port Sudan, what has happened is now this Navy ship has taken about 200 plus Indians, and now they're ferrying them to Jeddah, which is about a 10 to 12 hour distance through ship. It crosses the Red Sea. It will take them to Jeddah, and from Jeddah, the flights will bring back these Indians. So that is the best way to bring back the Indians.
So Shubhajit, like you mentioned, this evacuation process is far from straightforward. So what are some of the challenges that India is facing at the moment?
So the problem is that in Khartoum, from where the fighting is taking place, people have to travel to Port Sudan, which is almost a 15-hour drive. And one doesn't know how the roads are, whether it is. So it's a very dynamic security situation where it's very challenging, very risky. So that's why right now there are about, last report said that about 500 Indians had reached the Port Sudan, and about today morning or today afternoon, about 250 people have boarded the ship. But, about 3,000 Indians are stranded. Now, there are challenges in this as well, because who wants to come back? How many want to come back or not come back? And that sense, the Indian embassy, obviously, on the ground is the best judge to assess that how can they transport these people safely from Khartoum, where fighting is taking place, but the airspace is closed, to Port Sudan. Or if tomorrow there is a possibility of the flights landing in Khartoum and sort of extracting or evacuating Indians from Khartoum itself.
Right. And Shubhajit, just yesterday, a 72-hour ceasefire was announced in Sudan. Will that help in evacuating these stranded Indians to some extent?
Yeah, so, ceasefire was also announced earlier as well, a few days ago, but unfortunately it broke down because it's all about trust and whether these ceasefires are strictly maintained and adhered to. If they're not followed, then they don't mean anything. So the Indian embassy will obviously is on the ground and it will assess whether the ceasefire is holding. If the ceasefire holds and airspace is opened, then there is a possibility of the Indian Air Force aircrafts to land, which are already stationed in Jeddah, to land in Khartoum and bring back more people from Khartoum itself. And the second option is, if the ceasefire holds, then and the roads are sort of safe to travel, then a number could also gather, which whoever is nearby Port Sudan and can reach Port Sudan, they can reach Port Sudan from where the ships can take it to Jeddah. So this ceasefire does give a glimmer of hope, but we'll have to see how it holds or how it pans out.
Okay, and other countries have also stepped in to help India in this evacuation mission, right?
Yeah, so usually this is what happens in evacuation situations where countries which sort of get along well with each other do help each other's citizens. So, for example, A Saudi aeroplane was caught in the crossfire in Khartoum, and the plane was grounded. So the passengers as well as the crew were evacuated by the Saudi government. Now, out of the crew, it turned out to be 3 Indians. So those 3 Indians were evacuated by the Saudi government as well. Similarly, the French also evacuated some of its people, in which there were few Indians. For example, Sri Lanka has some nationals, some of its citizens in Sudan, and it has also reached out to India to evacuate some of the Sri Lankan nationals from Sudan. So India also makes this request. Also, other countries in the region would also reach out to India for helping, and that has happened even during the Ukraine crisis as well. So this kind of humanitarian gesture approach is taken. Obviously, India would prioritize Indians first, but it's not to say that citizens of other countries, friendly countries, are also. In fact, from Ukraine, if I remember correctly, there was one Pakistani national also who was evacuated from Ukraine. So these things happen, and countries cooperate, governments cooperate on these issues to protect and save the lives of citizens.
A few hours after recording this segment, the 2 Indian Air Force aircraft that were stationed in Jeddah, like Shubhajit mentioned, touched down in Port Sudan to carry out rescue operations. And next we talk about the ongoing protest by Indian wrestlers.
ये सुनने में आ रहा है हमेशा कि हम खत्म हो गए इसलिए डरना क्या हमें क्या चाहिए है क्यों करेंगे हम सिर्फ अपनी कुश्ती को बचाने के लिए कुश्ती को सेफ उस हाथों में ले जाने के लिए हम ये प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं.
This is from Jantar Mantar, where India's top wrestlers have been protesting since Sunday. In fact, this is the second time that wrestlers like Sakshi Malik, Bajrang Punia and Vinesh Phogat have sat in for a protest like this. Earlier this year in January, the wrestlers got together to speak out against the president of the Wrestling Federation of India, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, who is also a BJP MP. And they accused him of sexual harassment.
अगर किसी भी खिलाड़ी को कुछ भी होगा रेसलिंग में तो प्रेसिडेंट देश जो हमारे रेसलिंग प्रेसिडेंट है वो जिम्मेदार रहेंगे हमारी फेडरेशन जिम्मेदार उस चीज की.
Now, after the January protest, the government formed an oversight committee to look into the allegations. But after 3 months, the protesters are back at the same site. To know more about the reasons behind the latest protest, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Mihir Vasavda.
So, Mihir, can you first tell us why the wrestlers decided to protest again?
It's exactly 3 months after the government formed the oversight committee, Utsa. So the oversight committee, which was basically tasked with looking into the allegations of sexual harassment, the prime allegation, and also the irregularities, financial irregularities, and the arbitrariness in the running of the Wrestling Federation of India. These were the 3 broad allegations that the oversight committee was looking into. On January 23, it was formed and it was given 4 weeks to submit its report. And 3 months after that date, exactly on April 23, the wrestlers returned to their protest. Now, the wrestlers are claiming that A, there has been no action taken against the WFI or its president, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. And B, the findings of the committee report have not been made public, even though it's been 3 months after it was formed.
But during the protest, the government shared what they termed as major findings. Could you talk about what those findings were?
So the major findings, quote unquote, that the government mentions, they were referred to in a letter they had written to the Indian Olympic Association President PT Usha on Monday. And in that, they have highlighted 3 points. And these are largely systematic problems. So the first point that the government says that their committee found was the absence of an internal complaints committee under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. Then they said there was lack of adequate mechanism for awareness building among sports persons, for grievance redressal, etc. Then they said there was more transparency and consultation needed between the federations and the stakeholders, including sports persons. And lastly, they said there is a need for effective communication between the federation and sports persons. So in these 3 points, they have completely remained silent on what is the prime allegation against Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, that is of sexual harassment.
And some players like Sakshi Malik have alleged that this silence about Brij Bhushan is because he's from the BJP. Here is Sakshi during one of the interviews.
वो रूलिंग पार्टी से हैं और देखो पॉलिटिक्स हम नहीं जानते, हम तो सीधे साधे पहलवान हैं, हमेशा पहलवानी की है, लेकिन सपोर्ट है, इसीलिए अभी तक एफआईआर दर्ज नहीं है.
So Mihir, can you tell us why the wrestlers think that Brij Bhushan's BJP connection is the reason for this silence?
Right, so Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh is a 6-time MP. 5 times he's been a BJP MP, and the one time in 2009 he was an SP candidate. He comes from the politically important Uttar Pradesh. He is a MP from Kunda. And in middle of all this, he has also been at the helm of Wrestling Federation of India for a decade now. So the wrestlers claim that because of his BJP affiliation, because he is a MP for the party, the government hasn't taken any action against him. And they have also said that Brij Bhushan has used his power as well as money to ensure there is no action taken against him, despite a police complaint being filed on Friday, that is April 21.
Right, and this complaint, it is a sexual harassment complaint against Brij Bhushan. So tell us, what exactly does this complaint say?
So the police complaint was filed with the Connaught Place police station in New Delhi. This complaint basically is 7 women wrestlers alleging sexual harassment. They have also said that there was criminal intimidation on the part of Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. Among the 7 complainants, there is also a minor. And in that, they have listed the details of the incidents. So through our sources, we have come to know that the wrestlers have alleged in their complaints that the instances of sexual harassment date back to 2012 to as recent as 2022. They have claimed that some of the incidents, at least 4 incidents in fact, took place at Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh's MP bungalow at Akbar Road in New Delhi. And they've also claimed that there were incidents that took place during tournaments in India as well as abroad. And the FIR has not been filed, and hence the wrestlers approached the Supreme Court on Tuesday morning, and the Supreme Court has listed the matter for Friday and also issued a notice to Delhi police.
हमारे देश में इतने बड़े उच्च न्यायालय जो बनाए हैं, एक स्वतंत्र भारत के नागरिक है, तो उच्च न्यायालय हम गए हैं, हमें पूरी उम्मीद है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट जो है वो हमें न्याय दिलवाएगा, और जो एफआईआर जो पुलिस लॉन्च नहीं करी है तो उसके खिलाफ में भी हम जा रहे हैं कि हमारी एफआईआर लॉन्च की जाए, और जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन होनी चाहिए फेयर तरीके से होने चाहिए. जो हमारे जो कंट्री में इतने लॉ बने हुए हैं फेयर इन्वेस्टिगेशन के लिए, क्या हमारे लिए एक भी लॉ काम नहीं करेगा?
Okay, and can you tell us what the protesters are demanding now?
So largely there are 4 demands. One is that an FIR be filed against Brij Bhushan on the basis of their police complaint. 2, that he should be arrested under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, the POCSO Act, since one of the complainants is a minor. Then they have demanded his removal as the WFI president. And lastly, they have demanded that the federation itself be dissolved.
Right, and the wrestlers have also requested political parties, CARPs, and women's organizations for support. But initially they were against any kind of parties. So what changed?
That's a question that has been asked to the wrestlers as well. They have basically said that, look, when we compete for the country, we don't represent any political party. It is the country we represent. And similarly, this fight that they are having, the wrestlers claim, is for the country and it's not against any particular political party. The last time they said when they refused any political person, any politician coming down to the protest site, they said it was a mistake. And this time, to continue the protest, to continue fueling it, they have asked for support from all quarters, not just from the politicians, but from CUP leaders across the North India, as well as women's organizations and other social organizations too.
Okay, and Mihir, do we know what the government is thinking about this protest? Have we heard anything from them?
The only response from the government is that, like last time, when they tried to diffuse the situation by forming an oversight committee, this time they have asked the Indian Olympic Association, since the IOA is an umbrella body for all Olympic sports, they have asked them to form another committee which will take care of the day-to-day affairs of the WFI, including conducting its elections within 45 days of the committee's formation. The ministry says that this is a step in order to resolve the situation, but the wrestlers, having learned their lesson the last time, they aren't buying it yet again.
And in the end, we talk about Madhya Pradesh. Last week, the Congress party, which is the main opposition in Madhya Pradesh, accused the state government of allegedly conducting pregnancy tests on 200 women. All of these women had applied for a government marriage grant, and after some women were found pregnant, they got rejected for it. And this is what started a controversy in the state. To know more about this issue, here's Utsa again, speaking to the Indian Express's Jayprakash Naidu.
So, Jayprakash, can you first tell us what exactly are the accusations that the Congress party is making against the state government?
Yes, so the Congress government is alleging that 200 women were put through pregnancy tests in a district called Dindori in Madhya Pradesh, and the test was conducted in order to select women for a marriage scheme called Mukhyamantri Kanyadan Yojana. So now the district collector Vikas Mishra, speaking with us, clarified that not 200 but 5 women were put through pregnancy test at a government hospital, and so when the pregnancy test came positive, the doctor asked the women if they were married, and the women, as per the collector, told the doctor that they were married, and hence on that grounds they were rejected.
Right, and can you tell us more about this Mukhyamantri Kanyadan Yojana and how significant is it for the women of MP?
So under this scheme, the government gives you a total of 55,000 as a monetary help for the women who are getting married. Now out of this 55,000, 49,000 is deposited in the account of the woman, and the rest 6,000 rupees is given to the body which is conducting the mass marriage ceremony. Now this grant, it is very important for the people who are from below poverty line, tribal families, then widows and abandoned women. For them this becomes very important. And this scheme is for all the sectors in the society, not just for poor.
And Jayprakash, what are the eligibility criteria for women to be approved for this scheme?
So the eligibility criteria is very simple. For the woman, it is 18 years of age, and for the groom, it's 21 years of age, which is the legal age in our country. The second criteria is guardian of any of the groom or bride must be a native of Madhya Pradesh. The third criteria is that the women who are getting married must agree to get married in a mass marriage. If they are getting marriage in a single ceremony, then they are not beneficiary under the scheme. They have to agree to be a part of the mass marriage. And if the woman is already married, then she must be legally divorced to avail the benefit of this scheme.
So pregnancy is not a part of this eligibility criteria. But do we know why the women were made to get this pregnancy test in the first place?
Yes, so I spoke with the collector. So the collector tells me that there's a miscommunication over here. There was no pregnancy test done at all. So what happened according to the collector is these women were being tested for sickle cell anemia, which is a big issue in that district. So they just wanted to ensure that the women are not suffering from sickle cell anemia. While doing so, the collector claims that 5 women, while speaking with the doctor happened to ask them if they have missed their periods, which they say is a very general question to ask. And when the women said that yes, we missed our periods, 5 women said that. Then on the basis of the statement of the women, the 5 women were put through urine test. Now, there is no need to do urine test, but the urine test was done and they were found to be pregnant. So now there is no clarity on who asked the doctor to do the urine test.
Right, and do we know how the women are feeling about this entire thing now?
So they are enraged because I saw their videos on broadcast media and I spoke with the Sarpanch of the village where this incident took place. So the Sarpanch was telling me that the families are embarrassed, they are feeling humiliated. There was no need to do such tests, but still the tests were done and the women need justice. I have not heard from the women themselves. And of course, the women were taken by surprise because there is no such procedure. Second thing over here, which is very important, is as per the scheme, the women who get rejected can go in appeal and their appeal will be resolved within 30 days' time.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Utsa Sarmin and Shashank Bhargava. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.